There's a story that gets told about Fleetwood Mac that somewhere in the budget for one of their albums, there was a line item for cocaine, an actual entry for the drug, listed as the cost of doing business, right next to studio time and tape. Is it true? Well, I'll get to that in a moment because the real story doesn't need the legend. The real story is wild enough on its own. This is the story of a band that took the worst year of their personal lives and they turned it into one of the biggest albums ever made, not just in rock and roll history, in all of recorded music history. And then they took all that money, all that freedom, all that fame, and they spent the years that followed chasing the exact opposite of a hit. And this is how the creative freedom that almost broke Fleetwood Mac. So to understand how strange this gets, you have to understand how recording used to work. So back in the 60s, making a record was a job with a clock on it. The label booked the studio time, you showed up, often by a set time, and you had a budget and a deadline. The Beatles made some of their early albums in a matter of days. Studio time was expensive, and the labels watched every dollar, and the band did what they were told. It was a factory. I mean, it was a great factory, but it was a factory nonetheless. But by the time we got to the middle of the 1970s, that world, it was gone. The biggest bands had figured out that they held the power. They were the ones printing the money for the labels, so they stopped asking for permission. They wanted total freedom. Take all the time that you want, spend whatever it costs, and no band would push that idea further than Fleetwood Mac. And here's how they earned that freedom. In 1975, a struggling British blues band added two Americans, a guitarist and singer named Lindsey Buckingham and another singer named Stevie Nicks. And that new lineup put out an album that was self-titled called Fleetwood Mac. It ended up being a monster of a hit, but it climbed the charts slowly. It took more than a year to crawl all the way to number one. But once it got there, this band was one of the biggest acts in the world. And that changed everything with their label, Warner Brothers. Because when you make that kind of money for a record company, you stop being an employee and you start being the boss. The label's only real job was simple. Keep that hit machine going. Keep these people happy. Give them what they want. So when Fleetwood Mac went back in the studio, the leash was completely off. The mentality on both sides was basically whatever it takes. If they want to stay in the studio for months, fine. If it costs a fortune, fine. Just bring back another smash. That's the blank check era that they were living in. And the band was about to find out what total freedom comes with a hidden bill. And the album they made next was the smash Rumours. And the backstory is almost too perfect to be real. While they were recording it, the band was falling apart from the inside. I'm sure you've probably heard the story about the two couples in the band. They were breaking up at the same time. You had Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie. They were ending their romance. And the other couple in the band was John and Christine McVie. They were married and they were going through a divorce. I mean, think about it. These people had to walk into the same studio every single day and make beautiful music together while they were going through all this upheaval and their hearts were breaking. I mean, it was poison for them as humans, but it was rocket fuel for the material and the songs. They started writing songs about each other, singing pain directly at the person who caused it, who was only standing a couple of feet away. That raw heartbreak is exactly why Rumours connects with people. I mean, even today, you're hearing something real. And the way they work tells you about everything in that era. At the record plant in Sausalito, California, the studio's owner described their routine as the band would arrive around 7 at night, they'd have a big meal, and they'd party until 1 or 2 in the morning. And then once they were so wiped out that they could barely function, that's when they would start recording. Months of that, months. And the hours piled up into the thousands of hours. And now here's a fact that cuts against the usual stories. Rumours wasn't the wildly expensive album. Years later, Lindsey Buckingham pointed out that Rumours took about the same amount of time as their next album, but it cost a lot less, mainly because the studio they used charged far less per hour. The real money explosion came on the album after Rumours. Rumours was the heartbreak. The spending was still to come, and explode it did, but the first was the payoff. Rumours came out in 1977. It became one of the best-selling albums in history, tens of millions of copies. So now this band has even more money, even more freedom, and more pressure. The whole world is waiting for Rumours Part 2, and they decided to do almost the opposite. Okay, so let's deal with the cocaine. So there's no question the drugs were real, and the amount they were doing was enormous. As a matter of fact, drummer Mick Fleetwood himself, he's talked openly about the mountains of cocaine being consumed during these years. I mean, engineers at the recording studio, they describe nights that ran until sunrise fueled by cocaine, and the drugs were woven into how the band worked day and night. And that's where the famous story comes from. The tale that the band's cocaine became such a constant, expected part of their operation that it basically got treated like a supply that you budgeted for. I mean, some versions say it was even written into the paperwork. You'll hear it described as the velvet bag line item, a drug delivered like any other studio expense. But here's me being straight with you. That specific detail, an actual cocaine entry in an official budget, is rock legend. It's the kind of story that grows in the retelling. And I can't show you the invoice, and neither can anyone else. So I won't tell you it's a documented fact. But here's why the legend stuck. Because it feels true. I mean, because the spirit of it was true. The drugs weren't a side thing. They were baked into the whole operation of Fleetwood Mac. And as I'm about to explain to you, that operation got very, very expensive. The follow-up to Rumours was a double album called Tusk, and that was released in 1979, and it became famous for one number. It was the most expensive rock album ever made up to that point. And for years, the public was told the cost was at about $1 million for that album to be made. The truth came out later. I mean, the figure was closer to 1.4 million. So let's put that in today's money so we have a better understanding. That's somewhere north of about $6 million in today's terms for one album. So where did it all go? Some of it went somewhere amazing in the production itself and the record. The band liked their freedom so much that they spent a chunk of their own royalty money customizing their own room inside a Los Angeles studio so they could work on their own clock. The title track needed a giant, weird marching band sound, so they hired the 112-piece USC marching band, and they recorded them inside Dodger Stadium. As a matter of fact, if you've ever seen the video for Tusk, it's really a recreation of that day. And that one stunt reportedly cost them around $50,000 for just that one song. And then there's the simplest money pit of all, time. When nobody's telling you to hurry and you can afford to stay forever, you stay forever. The sessions stretched out for the better part of a year. Every hour in a studio costs money whether you make progress or not. And a band running on cocaine with no deadline and no boss in the room does not make fast decisions. That's the trap. The drug was supposed to fuel creativity, but it ended up jamming up the machine instead. So when everyone's wired and certain and unwilling to back down, a 5-minute conversation turns into a 5-hour argument. The freedom that was supposed to set them free is what kept them locked in that studio bleeding cash. So what happened once Tusk came out? Now, I've got to be fair here because this is another spot where the legend goes too far. I mean, you'll hear that Tusk bankrupted the band and it flopped, and that's not really true. Tusk actually went to #1 in the UK, and it ended up peaking at #4 in America. So by any normal standard, that's a hit. But it wasn't Rumours. Nothing was going to be Rumours. Rumours has sold something like 40 million plus copies since it was released. Tusk, on the other end of the spectrum, sold around 4 million copies. That's 10 times less. And when you've spent a record-breaking pile of money to make a record like Tusk, Those numbers sting. The album didn't fully earn back what it cost for a very long time. And it put a real strain on the band's relationship with the label Warner Brothers. And this is the lesson that's hiding in the whole story. It's called the law of diminishing returns. So the band's answer to everything had become more, more, more. More time, more money, more experiments, more excess. But at a certain point, more stops giving you more back. You pour in twice the money and twice the time, and you get a smaller result. I mean, the more is more philosophy quietly became more is less. So what do we take from all this? So there's a comfortable myth we like to tell about artists: the tortured genius, suffering for the art, the chaos, somehow being part of the magic. And there's some truth to that, for sure. I mean, the pain in Rumours really did make it a better record. But that myth also hides something uglier. Behind a lot of these stories is an industry that was happy to hand a struggling, addicted band a blank check as long as the band kept making them money. Nobody in a suit from Warner Brothers walked into that studio and said, enough. Why would they? The freedom that looked like a gift, it was also a trap. And the people who profited had every reason to keep the trap baited. And the bill came due in ways that lasted for many, many years. I mean, in the music business, that giant advance, it's not a present. They don't just give it to you because they like you. I mean, it's a loan against your future earnings. Every dollar the label spends has to be paid back of what you earn before you see any real money. So a band can be world famous, they can have sold tens of millions of records and still be clawing quietly their way out of that debt for years because they spent the future to pay for the present. That's the real cautionary tale. And it's not just about one band in the 1970s. It's for any creative person today. Freedom feels like the dream. No limits, no deadlines, no one telling you no. But limits aren't always the enemy. Sometimes the deadline, it's the thing that saves you from yourself. Fleetwood Mac actually traded long-term stability for a string of temporary highs, creative and otherwise, and they spent years paying for that trade. They made some of the greatest, and I mean greatest, music of their lives, and it nearly cost them everything. So if you've enjoyed this one, and you're not already subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, like it, share it. If you know anyone that likes Fleetwood Mac, share it with them. I'm going to have more stories like this coming in the future. And please tell me in the comments, because I do read your comments and I reply to a lot of them. What's the one album you think that was worth every penny of the chaos that made it? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.